at noon, and I'm sure everyone else on the call, including Dave and Lori and TM, have places to be. So maybe we'll just get started, and we will, I'm sure we'll have more folks joining throughout the call. And as Dave mentioned, we're streaming live on Facebook. So first of all, thank you to everyone for joining us. My name is Nick Miller. I am the Executive Director at the Venture College at Boise State. And this is, I think, our 9th session of Survive to Thrive. We've put this program on in partnership with Trailhead as an effort to help businesses and organizations respond to the pandemic and give them access to the information, resources, and people that they would need to not only survive this challenging time, but hopefully come out on the other side of it ready to thrive, hence the name. And today we're really excited to shift our focus just a little bit. You know, we've been talking about everything from finance to leadership and marketing. And we thought today we would change it up a little bit to focus on a couple, well, really 3 startups. One, I'm sure most people are familiar with in the community, Cauze, and Jason Hausske is here from Cauze. And then 2 efforts that are relatively new and have been formed in response to the pandemic, which to me are really emblematic of our community as a whole and how people will rally to the cause to help one another, to help people that are in vulnerable situations. So we're hoping to talk a little bit about that, share these 2 efforts, which are City of Good and the COVID Cultural Commissioning Fund, which I'm just going to call the CCC Fund. And, you know, I think it's both, you know, inspirational for folks to see how the community is rallying to support one another. And hopefully, as all of you are on the call today, you'll be inspired to pitch in, whether it's giving your time, your talent, or your treasure to help these causes as well. So maybe if we could start out by having each panelist introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about the organization that they are representing today. I think all of our panelists wear varied hats at different times. So maybe we'll start with Jason and then go from there.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm the founder of Cauze. Cauze is a social network for charitable good that was started here in Boise. We have a team of 6 people, hardworking people here in Boise, and our entire mission and goal in life is to unleash good. Cauze is a giving app, so it's really a personal giving account that allows individuals to give to any nonprofit at any moment of inspiration. The reason we started it was that I was personally leaning forward, feeling like, gosh, I feel like I could give more to charity. And when I looked at the way I gave, it's all over the place. I'm, you know, walking through the line at Whole Foods and my money goes to their foundation. And, you know, if I work at Micron, they'll match my giving, but that's in a separate bucket. If I work at a small company, they won't do that because it's too hard to administer. Friends are running races on different websites. And we just thought, what if we changed the whole dynamic and put the giver in the center? What if we said, let's make, you know, giving easy. If Eddie Vedder says, let's go do something, why can't 5 million people give $1 in a minute? Why does it take so much work? And so that's what we've done. And that's our goal. We've raised a couple $1 million from investors. We're a startup in town. And then we just really are here to sort of connect givers with the amazing work that people like Dave and Lori and their teams are doing. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. Dave, do you want to just introduce yourself as well as tell us a little bit about City of Good?
Yep, I'm Dave Krick. My day job is running restaurants, but right now there's not a lot to do in that regard. City of Good came about as we, I guess as the realities of COVID-19 sunk in, and for us, we had to lay off our entire team, and I watched all of my peers in our industry lay off all of their teams. We went into a what can we do mode and started calling a bunch of my friends, many of them which are on this screen, Lori included, and Nick, and of course Jason got involved in our effort. And we realized that we needed to put restaurant workers back to work in the restaurant industry. The forces that reward people in our business, those forces have also rewarded cheap labor, and they've rewarded, not many benefits. And so a lot of people who work in the culinary industry are, basically just a step above being at risk themselves. And when we laid them all off, even though we knew that there would probably be some unemployment benefits, the loss of connection with many people who probably struggle with mental health issues was a danger in our community. And we wanted to find a way to get them back to work as quickly as we could in a way that was safe, given the new conditions that COVID-19 presented us. And so, it was a pretty easy lift to say, well, let's just start producing meals for people in need. Let's find some money for doing that, and we can pay people to come back to work. We attached some values to it. We wanted to be able to use local food as much as possible because our farm community was also in a crisis. They needed to figure out how they were going to move their crops, how they were going to, things that they had invested all of their resource in over the winter were now ready to be sold right at the point when this thing hit. And so we wanted to use food from our farmers, so we were putting some of them to work. And as we were employing people, let's create a new mentality with how we put people back to work. So we wanted to place a value that we would pay people $15 an hour as a living wage to be doing this kind of work. And thus the program was born with a lot of help and a lot of partnerships. I can get into, where we're going with it now and other things that we're working on, but I'll let others go first.
Great. Yeah, we'll definitely want to dive into, both the challenges and successes and where it's headed. Lori, I know you're involved with the City of Good effort as well, but I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about the CCC fund that there's so many partners on and where that's headed.
Yeah, and I'm got pulled in, like Dave says, to helping with City of Good, because when people like Dave Krick ask you to help, you, as you know, figure out what you can do, and that's kind of the great thing about this community. But my day job is I'm a health insurance and benefits agent, and I have an agency, and so all of our clients are small businesses or families or individuals. So we've definitely seen lots of different sides of this, helping our clients and friends through this time. But about, 10 years ago, I started working on a project that became the Treefort Music Festival. And we were one of the first things that had to make the decision to shut down. So when we decided to postpone until late September, we recognized that there are a lot of people in this community that we're going to lose income that they couldn't replace. Even if we have the festival, hopefully again in late September, it's not really replacing that income, because those people probably would have had the same work and the same opportunities in September. So we just realized that there are a lot of people in this community that do, not just the musicians, but the people that run the venues, the people that work at the venues, the people that do the sound and the lighting and the art that happens during a festival. And they're going to be the last people that get to go back to doing what they do for a living. So we started working on two different efforts. One of them is the Treefort Live Music Relief Fund. And you can find both of these through Cauze, which has been, Jason has always been awesome with reaching out to us or working with us saying, how can we help when it comes to trying to further causes that we really need to reach people with. But the Treefort Live Music Relief Fund is meant to help us just directly help people who have lost income during this time that are in the live music industry. So that is a very vulnerable population, and they probably won't be the first people that get processed in the unemployment lines. They don't have traditional paperwork. They don't have traditional the path to trying to get those benefits that are out there. So that was our first effort that we really wanted to work on. And then we were also concurrently working on, and Dave mentioned this to me early on, one thing when we looked at other things that have happened, particularly the Spanish flu pandemic, there's not much out there that you can go to and really read or hear or see what people's experiences were and how they coped with that time and how they got through and what was created from that time. And so we have partnered with specifically the Morrison Center and some very generous donors to provide a fund called I just call it the CCC fund too, because I have to think about what the C's are. and what it is a fund that artists can apply to for grants, specifically to produce works that represent what was happening during this time and what came about during this time and what the results were, what people were experiencing. So we really want people to get in there and apply for those so that this time will be remembered and we will learn from this and the art will live on. And so that's what that effort is about.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so just appreciate all of you being here today with us. And before we jump into the questions that TM and I have, just a reminder to those of you in the audience that if you have questions for the panel, please submit them on the chat and we'll get them over to the panelists. And yeah, hoping that it's a dialogue and a discussion. TM and I have lots of questions for them, but we want to make sure that you have the opportunity if you have any questions that we're not covering as well. So, maybe just to start out, I think one of the things that might surprise a lot of folks is starting 2 new organizations in the middle of a pandemic. 2 new efforts, and obviously both of them were, in response to, but maybe just give us a brief overview of, the challenges or the advantages starting during this time. Just what your experience has been, good, bad, ugly.
I can go on that one. I think that people are going to respond to this like they respond to anything. And if your natural reaction is to reach out to the people that have ideas or people that want to do something to help, that's just going to happen tenfold in a time like this. And I've met some pretty incredible people that are sitting at home trying to figure out what they can do to help. And thank goodness for this technology, because we've had probably more productive meetings in this period of time than I would have otherwise had, with some pretty dynamic and amazing people who are just trying to solve problems. And everybody comes with a different skill set, and that's where getting together and just brainstorming things seems to create a lot of synergy, where I remember Dave's first problem is how do we take the money? How do we take the money to get it to the restaurants so they can buy the food and make the meals? And that's first thing I thought of was Jason and what he's been trying to do as a vehicle to make that easier and more shareable. So we started with that connection, and then I'm good at paperwork, so I started working on paperwork. And I just think in this time, it's just, I said during one of our Treefort meetings about postponing the festival, people are going to respond to this crisis or this time the way they handled pretty much everything. And I've seen this community come together to figure out how to apply who they are and what they can do to solving a problem.
And one comment, I think when things like this come together, the first thing I think about is everyone sitting on this call wanting to act. Like that's the missing piece has always been for me. This amazing Treefort Relief Fund, the CCC Fund, the City of Good. TM works at Trailhead, that's a nonprofit. Nick works at Boise State Venture College, that's a nonprofit. As a giver, we just want to remove all the friction. Like there should be no reason that anybody on this call should be able to give $5 or $10 instantly to all those initiatives. And we see like this, a time like this going, how do we mobilize the desire to support these guys. And, anyways, I think it's awesome what they're doing, and we're so excited to just make it easy for everyone to do something about it.
Maybe pulling on that thread a little bit, Jason. I know you're Boise based, but you obviously help organizations regardless of where they're located. What are you seeing across the country, and that may be similar to this, or that may put Boise in a different light, or just give us context on the kind of the national trends that you're seeing and how these efforts relate to those?
We're pretty tied in. So our thing is, how do we change behavioral science to really unleash the good, right? To unleash the individual desire to give to all these things, and so we're very tightly tied to Boise just because we're here. So, we don't have these kinds of experiences or conversations necessarily with the initiatives as closely as we do here with these guys. But my call at 12 is with Ariana Huffington's Thrive Global, and they're working with CAA to try and do something, nationwide around first responders. We're working with Josh Ritter's team around how to, you turn those silo sessions into something that are really immersive as a giver, because I do want to support something national, but my heart is in Boise. And so I don't think we're in a position to necessarily know what's going on, in each community, but there seems to be an increased desire by people with influence, people who have the energy to go get stuff done, and then the givers who want to sort of participate. So it's just an increased desire. And I think a lot of people also don't feel like they can give as much maybe in this time. And so the idea of micro donations or collective giving is really important. So we're seeing that trend. For example, with City of Good, I think, what have we raised? Just on our site, we've done 16 grand, but now we're doing stuff like, I don't know if people know, but there's Lost Grove is coming out with a beer label at the beginning of June that has a Cauze code right on the label, and all the proceeds go to City of Good, and people can just hold their phone up and give. So there's those kinds of things that are happening at a national level, and then here in Boise, with us.
Thanks. Maybe building on that a little bit, Dave, I think nationally we've heard a lot about restaurants and restaurant and really hospitality workers. And were there any causes or movements that you saw happening nationally that kind of inspired you for City of Good? And how would you say the City of Good kind of distinguishes itself from those? What's in common with these other efforts, and what may be different?
It's interesting. You think you have a unique idea, but time, it's always relevant to what's going on. And so, as we were working on, let's put our kitchens back to work feeding people, and we're creating City of Good, and we looked around the country, and I think I saw a dozen of these efforts, almost simultaneously pop up, which had never existed before. But there were a handful that were maybe better prepared because they had been doing something else. Their mission had been similar. And I think they were really inspiring, and that would be Jose Andreas and his World Central Kitchen. They had a slightly different mission, but they sort of shifted into this mode really quickly. And so it was good to be able to learn from them and see what they were doing. And then there was Rethink Food in New York City that their mission was really working on food waste, recapturing food waste and plugging it back into networks where there was food insecurity. Really inspiring work, and ironically, they were prepared and were doing almost exactly what we were doing at the same moment. So we were able to plug into that. In fact, now California, Governor Newsom has created a program on a state level where they're paying restaurants to produce meals. So it's being deployed on a large scale there. And there's a variety of other efforts. I think what's unique about what we're doing is that ours is not, I think that was just project number one for us. And I think you know, in times like this, when there is a crisis, there are opportunists that take advantage of the crisis, and you know, we can see people who are really wealthy and make a lot of money during crisis. And I think social needs sometimes gets ignored during crises like this. We solve the initial symptom, but we don't work on the greater strategy. And if we've learned anything through the various crises, at least that I've been involved in, it's like we've got to take advantage of crisis like this to be able to bring social change. Boise has this tremendous asset that is its community's desire to be involved. It's a very nice community, right? Anybody that comes here comments on that. We're like Pleasantville. People here want to be involved. We had this comment that we have more socially minded businesses, more B Corps for our size than many other places in the country. And I think it's because it's a community that sort of breeds that. But what we lack as a community is a structure to tie it together, to give it purpose. And I think for us, what was interesting about the group that came together, and I'm like, you know, it's people like Jason and Nick and Lori and even Tiam who helped connect. Like, I didn't know how this group was going to come together or what it was going to do. And, you know, now we've got terrific people like Jim Matheson working with us. And, you know, we've got Michelle Anderson, who's this co-op's CEO, and she brought her resources to the team. And I'm going to forget a whole bunch of people, so I'm not going to say all the people that are on our team. But what's cool is we've got a software engineer, Nick Hugh, who's just tremendous. And we've realized that collectively, we have the ability to do more things than we thought. We had, I'm a community member on our farmers market board, and when this happened, we were dealing with, you know, also how do we get farmers to sell their crops? Farmers, like a lot of people in our industry, you know, people in our industry are paycheck to paycheck. Well, farmers are season to season. They invest in their crops. They have to sell those crops, so they've got money to plant their next crop. And so they were panicked at how they were going to sell, and we were working across the state with farmers markets who didn't know how they were going to open because farmers markets, and so they couldn't open. And this is where they sell most of their crop, especially, you know, small farmers. This is a business incubator. And we quickly adapted to this idea that we would do a drive-through model, but we realized it was volunteer intensive. Well, ironically, as we were building City of Good, we were trying to figure out how we were going to distribute meals, and we didn't have a vehicle for how we were going to distribute meals. And the idea quickly was like, wait a second, we've got a machine that can distribute meals that needs volunteers, and we've got volunteer capacity. And so we quickly took over the volunteer operation at the Boise Farmers Market. And what we realized was that we were doing more than just being a volunteer machine for them. We were actually helping them redesign their business model in the middle of a crisis. A business model that, oh, by the way, was putting 40 businesses to work. So as we're trying to figure out how to schlep out a few meals to people in need, and, you know, we've got this huge firepower working on this project that we thought was our project, but on the side, we're helping 40 plus businesses survive. We're taking an operation that could barely put out 300 orders on the first Saturday to an operation this past Saturday that did almost 800, and our goal is to get over 1,000. The farmers market, because of the efforts of City of Good, is actually starting to outsell, from a revenue perspective, what the farmers market was doing last summer. And that is also helping us think about farmers markets all across the country, because what are farmers markets? They are incubators of business, and very important business. We talk about agriculture land being super important to our community, and we should be preserving it. But you can't preserve ag land if you don't have a solution for the people who work on that land, the business model. And that solution starts at a place like a farmer's market. It's an incubator. And if we can create a better business model for the farmer's market to survive, this is something that has legs way beyond Boise. It is something that the farmers markets across this country are seeking. And here we are in the center of it, not even realizing this is what we're doing, but we're bringing together, you know, the resources of people who want to help our community towards an effort that needs help and solving a big problem that I think can go further. So I think that's, you know, as we move forward with City of Good, I think we're looking at that maybe being our strength. how do we bring together the people in our community that want to be involved and want to help, and the socially minded businesses that have capacity to do some of this? How do we connect them together to be able to do this better?
Dave, I really like the way you frame that. You talk about, opportunists, but then you also talk about the opportunity to change some long-term systemic underlying shortcomings, if you will, in the way we live our lives. And one of the things you mentioned earlier is in the way we employ people. People being the most valuable asset of any organization. What sort of fundamental long-term changes do you envision if this comes true and we are able to seize this opportunity and change the way we do things in the way we employ people in your industry? What are some of the things you're hoping to remove or new paradigms you'd like to see?
I'm glad you brought that up. I think, in parallel to all of this work, we've also got another effort going on. It's a state organization called FAIR Idaho, and it's really looking at the independent food and beverage assets across the state, the small businesses, from farmers to farmers markets to independent grocers and independent restaurants and food producers, small food producers, which are, some of our most interesting small businesses, I think, across the state, from small bakeries to cheesemakers to you name it, all the startup, food companies. How do we begin to link them together? So again, in the eye of a storm, it's hard to do this work when everything is rolling strong and everybody's busy with, their just normal economic day-to-day business. But when you end up in a storm like this, it stirs everything up. And in that crisis, all of a sudden people are willing to listen and willing to work together. I could have never gotten, independent restaurants to consider farmers as their partners in an effort to create a statewide policy group, until you're in the middle of a crisis and you realize we have a lot in common. And how do we bring those common issues together to work with one voice towards an improvement of our condition? Because we do need to fight back. At my industry, my trade group, which I fights to push down minimum wage efforts. In any effort to sort of raise the minimum wage or work for a living wage is something that the restaurant industry is notorious at fighting against. They want no minimum wage, or we're rewarded for cheap labor. They want a macro food system that, as we've seen through this crisis, is not sustainable. And the only way we change that is to organize the people who see a different path. And so it's in a crisis like this that we do it. And we do think, that through this, we can begin to advocate for, incremental change in minimum wage policy, and trying to figure out what can we do for people from, it's not uncommon. You see people in farm workers to people who work in small food startups, to people who work in beverage startups, and people who work in the restaurant industry. The people who work in those industries, especially on the back end, they're low paid and they have very few benefits. And we can change that, but it's going to take a collective effort to put it together because it's a complicated problem.
Continuing to pull on that same thread of future paradigms, Lori, if I can get you to weigh in on this. I read one of the goals of the CCC Fund to say, helping to create future paradigms, a society, post-pandemic society, and using artists to do that. And so, I read that captivated my attention right there, because I see a lot of synergies between creatives, entrepreneurs, and technologists. So how do you see the role of creatives and artists in helping society create that future paradigm in a post-pandemic world?
Yeah, I know a lot to what Dave is saying about resiliency. One of the goals of the Treefort Community Fund, its overriding goal is to really create more resiliency in the live music culture and the ecosystem we have here in Boise. And Eric, my partner, has been on so many calls with so many groups where they're talking about the same thing and addressing the same thing. For a long time, we've talked about the idea of a creative economy, and people want to live around people that inspire them and help them express themselves. Everybody's got a different skill set. Everybody's got a different gift to bring to the table. But I think to discount the economics of being a creative in your community, this is a time where we realize that there's no resilience in that for that group of people. These are people who are usually they're being creative in their spare time, or they're being creative for a very, very low wage, if you can even call it a wage. So they have very little to no ability to survive through a time like this because they're not supported it's not built into our society, into our mind frame to think of them as essential and to make sure that there's support for them and year-round, cycle-round resiliency for that whole industry. I mean, we've seen venues come together with all sorts of different creative groups, recognizing that every piece of the infrastructure that makes live music happen or that makes art happen has to be supportive to really create a well-rounded community, one that we take for granted living in. So in the same instance for restaurant workers, you put in some infrastructure that happens year-round, that provides a need, but also creates more resiliency for the people that work in that industry. We need to start thinking the same way about how important it is that art and music not only survive and exist after all this is over, but are an essential part of getting us through it and remembering it and expressing how we got through it and expressing what it felt like and how we changed and what we learned and how we grew. Otherwise, it's all for naught.
I want to add something to this if I can. I'm not cutting in front of
Please do.
Not only do I agree with Lori, I mean, I think it's like early on when we talked, she's just always been a rock for me in terms of her thoughtfulness about what makes great community. I think, Treefort is a testament to that. I don't know how long this community searched for its sort of signature come together celebration, and Treefort has organically filled that void for us. It's just so important. First comment to her, we need a Treefort. We've got to build a Treefort. I don't know what it looks like, but we got to put it together. She excites
I didn't know what you meant by that, but what are you saying? What are you saying?
So in our industry, and you'll hear this, like if you listen to people from the governor to, experts on how to reopen restaurants, what do they talk about? Make sure people are washing their hands, space your tables apart, make sure that there's good social distancing in your restaurants. And we've got to reopen because that's how we save the world, is get our restaurants reopen. And so, like us in our restaurants, of course, we spaced all of our tables out. We're looking at what it's going to look like. And it's awful. Like restaurants don't operate that way. And I was reading about restaurants in Hong Kong that had reopened after this, and the comments from guests that were sitting in these restaurants they were just sad. They were quiet because, people were spaced apart and weren't talking. And so just the atmosphere itself was really bad. And it's a testament to those people don't get it. The creative side of who we are as human beings is what makes us tick. And right now we need our creative capacity more than we've ever needed it, because they're doing things to help us get through this in a different way. We need solutions. We need ideas for how to operate our restaurants and our communal spaces, our gathering places, in ways that are safe, that meet the moment, but that are fun and that engage us. I want a restaurant that feels full, but that's also safe. And that's my problem. And I've got some ideas how I do it, but I need the creative community to come in and help us do this. And yet here they are unemployed. We have no solution for them. Our solution is, oh yeah, you guys just need to wait for a while until, the leaders figure out what we're supposed to do with you. But, you might or might not get some unemployment because what you do for a living is really not valued by our community. It's like, no, we need them. We need to put them to work. Signage is critical. These people are our sign makers. Building props. It's like I could see us building all sorts of props. We've got to create spaces that people can come together that are enlivened by musicians but that are allowed to be safe. I'm really inspired with what Elizabeth is trying to do at the Modern, where they're going to put musicians on the balconies and they're going to use their parking lot. And it's like, we need these ideas. We need to be able to bring our creative people together. And so somehow we've got to create a system that values creative people in a different way.
Well, and I also think you strike on a nerve when you use the word waiting for leadership. I think a lot of people have realized that we have to be our own leadership through this. We really need to decide how we want as a community to come out the other side of this. What have we learned? I mean, we're looking to leaders who don't know any more than we do, and we're hoping that they can tell us how we need to come through this. And that really doesn't serve us very well. We need to really decide, why do we come together? Why do we go to restaurants? It's not because we're hungry. Why do we go to listen to live music? We could listen to it at home. What's the difference? What are we really trying to accomplish with these gatherings, with these businesses that we need to do differently? And how can we accomplish that without the way it used to look? If you get down to identifying what it is that we need about being together and doing those things that we always came together to do, that's where we all need to be creative.
Now, let me pull, I can't help but ask this question now, and I'm going to pull on a thread at the risk of asking you all grassroots leaders something that might derail this, but let's do it. What do you see the role of government being in this? So what for example, I've read that the UK and the German government, they've released huge economic relief funds, specifically targeted towards the creative industries, towards artists. That's just one example of what's happening in other countries and other places. And, we're talking about, grassroots, boots on the ground leadership to make changes. And yet we're trying to change things. And I'm trying to change things that are rooted in a bigger systemic, policy driven reality. How do you reconcile the two? How do you innovate and blaze the trail on something this systemic and that affects so many people's lives, and do that presumably with very little guidance or involvement from government? What's the role of government in all of this?
That is, I'm glad you asked that question. I was kind of beating around the bush about that, but our former mayor said to me, I remember after the first Treefort, his office, they said, "This is awesome. Our community came together and said, this is what we want to do. This is how we want to be together. The role of government is not to come up with that opportunity, but to support it." And so as industry leaders, as business owners, as community members, I think what we need to do is stop waiting for government to tell us what they think the right thing is. We need to say, this is what we think is right. We know our business. We know our community. We know what we want to get back to. Here are some ideas that we have come up with as to how we want to do this. We need you to support that, instead of waiting for them to tell us what to do and then criticizing them when it's wrong.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think I think one of the things that frustrates me a lot of times about government is it's a very controlled industry. I think just the nature of politics itself, it tends to be very control the message, and it's a top-down approach. And if we are to evolve, I think it's that through the resource that government has, which they have tremendous resource, they're building systems to connect people, to allow for involvement from the ground up. So where they fail us, I think, is not building those systems that allow people to connect together. It's like what we're talking about in City of Good, trying to find channels to connect people together. It's resource intensive to try to build these channels. And I wish within the resource of government, they would use the resource capacity that they have to help build that infrastructure so that community involvement could be more coordinated and orchestrated. Because in the absence of it, we're forced to do it. But Lori's right. We need to do it anyway. So let's do it, because we know how we're going to rebuild a community, and it's going to be from the ground up. And it's going to be trying to find ways to engage people who want to be engaged in the process. That's what makes me sad, is so many people, wanting to help, trying to find a way to help, trying to find a way to plug in, as Jason says, trying to find a way to donate, but not knowing how or where to apply it. And we can do a better job at that.
Yeah, maybe to speak to that a little bit, Jason, just tell us a little bit about how your organization does give people that a little bit more freedom outside of just the constraints of I pay my taxes and hope the right things happen, but to be able to direct their funds and their time towards what they're passionate about.
Well, I hear Dave and Lori, and I've known Lori since I remember her saying, I'm going to start this music festival in 6 months. I'm like, okay. Anyways, I've been inspired by people like this, and I'm like a fan, and I just want to act. And so many times in your busy life, you don't have time to do that. And so what I've always tried to figure out is how do we remove the friction so that I can act on this inspiration that I'm feeling right now. I want to do it socially with everybody else that's experiencing the same thing, whether I'm at a concert, in a restaurant, on a Zoom call. So we've really tried to tap into that inspired moment of action and make it very simple, because I won't even call a cab nowadays, right? I will only order an Uber. And it's this, and as much as it sounds terrible, I'm not going to take 10 minutes to write a check or fill out a credit card form and all that. I want to give in the moment, but I also want to do it socially. So that's one thing. But the second thing is I also have influence, right? I have influence. I'm an employee at a company. That company gives money to charity. I'm the employee. I want to influence that in the form of matching. I get rewards at work in wellness in the form of Amazon gift cards. I don't want more Amazon gift cards. I'd rather take that money and give it to City of Good. If I bring my own mug into Java, I get a 25-cent discount, right? I would love that 25 cents to go through me to City of Good or to something that's inspiring me in the community. And so I think the individual, I believe in the power of individuals, and I think individuals have an innate desire to support these things. And I think individuals ultimately have the influence with brands and companies and employers to direct things that matter, to things that matter to us individually. So that I like I said, I'm just a fan. I get inspired by this stuff, and I just want to make it easy for everyone to act on it.
Well, maybe to build on that a little bit, how can folks get involved with your efforts, or how have they? And maybe this is a good time to shift towards what does the future look like as well for each of these efforts, and what are ways that the community can support you?
I let these guys have all the great ideas. What the role we play is in the Cauze app. Once you have an account with your saved account, or you can fund it monthly and then give it the moments. It's like your own foundation. You can give it those moments. Literally right now, I could go into my app, and I just did actually. I took a picture of this screen and gave $50 to City of Good because I'm like, oh, I love Dave, So, I mean, and it took 15 seconds. And the point is, I can go do that to there. I can do that to CCC. I can do it to any charity in the United States instantly. And so, and by the way, there's matching in there too. The Lacey Bishop Real Estate is matching donations. The Rolf Charitable Fund is matching donations in the app. And so that's where we fit in this. We just want to make it so that people can act on the moments to support these guys.
I think one thing that we've realized, and Dave hit on this a little bit, is that there are a lot of efforts in this town that are, doing things with a very few people. And one thing that's really hard to do is to coordinate volunteers when you need them. And for Treefort's purpose, we have a huge group of people that consider themselves Treefort volunteers all year long, and we communicate with them all year long. And that is a major resource. And we talked about that with City of Good, and we've got a couple of the volunteer coordinators from around town, a couple from Treefort, one that had been with Boise Bicycle Project, that know how to put these groups of people together and mobilize them. And it would be nice if, because there's everyone has something to give, whether it's their attention, whether it's their donations, whether it's their time, whether it's a certain skill set. but what we all lack sometimes is the ability to connect those things. It's like if something that I'm good at, if my superpower can plug in somewhere else to help something, and I don't know, if I never know about it, then that's kind of gone to waste. So I feel like what could come out of this, the other side, is getting connected to what's going on by being connected to a large group of volunteers that maybe put themselves to use year round, helping all sorts of efforts that need help. We just don't know about what they're doing, and we don't know what they need. And if every organization had to set up a volunteer network of its own, well, I've seen it. It's onerous and it's tiring, and it's not always as fulfilling as maybe just having one or two large groups that are there and waiting. So share, if there are people out there, if there are artists out there that aren't connected to the Cultural Commission, we've got money there. We want them to do what they're good at, to help record, to pay their expenses, but also to help record what people are going through right now. So let them know about it, share what is happening. And if you feel like someone that needs a meal, figure out how to get them a meal, figure out how to get City of Good the information that they need to get that person a meal. So I guess that's what I think people need to do, or what they need to do to act, is figure out how they want to be involved, share it with other people so that we can all be more connected.
Yeah, I'm piggybacking on all of that. Yes, I mean, I can be more specific. I think, with our effort with City of Good, we do have a volunteer machine. Thanks to, I've learned through just Lori and the Treefort volunteer machine, and we've got Sam Gilbert, who was the Boise Bike Project volunteer coordinator. We've got this great volunteer machine that we're building, and I think we have an opportunity right now. We need volunteers. The Boise Farmers Market, it takes about 100 every week to pull this thing off. And ironically, it's one of these efforts that it takes more people to social distance than less. It's how you mechanize the station. And so as we're trying to do something, we actually need more. And what we're worried about is volunteer fatigue. So we need to build that pool, which is kind of what Lori's talking about. So I think an easy way for people to tap in is just helping plug us into your networks for how we find to this, because what we want everybody volunteering every week. What we want is, people who like doing it on a schedule that fits for them. And I think this is a way to plug into that greater network, because I think that's what we're building is that kind of network. And through that, we're able to identify people who have super talents, superpowers, as Lori suggests, that we're able to then direct in even more useful ways. Because within this, we have a need for people with specific talents. And it's been awesome being able to get them plugged in a better way. And I think obviously we've got to, for us to serve our mission, the City of Good, it's going to be resource intensive. And so continuing to find creative ways to build our funding capacity. And I think part of that is us making sure that we're plugging in useful ways that the community finds has value, and also being creative about how we plug people into the fundraising effort.
Yeah, and could you imagine 100,000 people being connected with zero friction to giving a buck, like instantly? Like, I see these initiatives, and there's so much work these nonprofits put into raising money, and they end up having to go to the big guys, because it's kind of like, I need the 25 grand, the 50 grand, but I just believe there's an opportunity that, you could connect everyone, so that there's no reason why a bunch of us couldn't just give $1 or $2 or $5 and literally go fund a project in 15 minutes. It just can exist, it seems to me.
And I think what you're missing, not necessarily missing, but not emphasizing, is that by giving that dollar, if you're in that app, what it really does, and you talk about this all the time, is that you're sharing the good, you're sharing the cause, you're getting people more information about it. And if they want to volunteer, if they want to get involved, it just came up in their feed, and it's something that they didn't know about before. So there's helping financially, but then it's also helping those causes and organizations reach more people, and more people who might be inspired or feel passionate about that cause who never would have heard of it before.
Yeah. I'll add, it's like, there's when we do plug people in, we've got people volunteering at the farmer's market who've never been to the farmer's market before. And by volunteering at the farmer's market, they all of a sudden get inundated with these products because they're handling them, right? They're actually working in a store, or they're picking orders for people who have ordered from the farmer's market. So they're seeing these products, and I don't know, I don't think I've talked to a single volunteer at the Boise Farmer's Market in the past 4 weeks who, when they left, have said, you know what? I know one thing, I'm really hungry. I want to buy some of this food. And so now they're starting to buy some of it. And they're realizing that we have this tremendous agriculture community here in our region. And these are businesses that need your support. And so now we're connecting them with those businesses. So I think that's, like, for us, the more people we can get volunteering in efforts like this, the more our community gets plugged into what's going on in our community. And it's addictive.
I think related to that, we've talked a lot about adding a volunteering and ability in Cauze, because currently you can go in, you can give a gift to a friend, you can give it to a charity, but I want the ability to go in and say, I just volunteered 2 hours at, the farmer's market. But then as somebody who's a friend who sees that, I can give money to that. I could be like, Megan, that's amazing you're doing that. Like, here's $10, not to her, but just to sort of, or if a kid goes in and volunteers, it's like grandma living in Seattle's like, I'm all over that, like these things have an ability to sort of expand, I feel like, and whether it's money or time, it's just ultimately the individual, a collective of individuals has opportunity to change our community, and we hope we can help enable that. But
yep.
All right. Well, I know we're getting near the end of our time, so I guess I'll wrap it up here. And first, thank you to Jason and Dave and Lori, not only for making the time to join us today, but also just for what you're doing in the community. I think that all of your day jobs are really emblematic of what makes Boise such a special place. And all of you are kind of, you represent the fact that grassroots efforts can be successful, and not only successful, but can help to build a stronger community. I think that what I've heard today is really about a bias for action, which I think if you come back to where our series started with helping startups kind of figure out where do they go in these uncertain times, your action and your bias for action, just to say, okay, maybe we don't have this thing 100% dialed in, but we're jumping in with both feet and we're going to figure it out, build it as we drive, fund it as we build it, is really admirable. And I'm sure there are moments where it seems like you may be crazy for being in the middle of it, but I know that you're having an impact in the community, and I've seen it firsthand. So congratulations on what you've done, and we're big fans at the Venture College, and I feel confident saying at Trailhead as well. Big fans of what you do, and as a follow-up, we will include all of the links to the Cauze app for these different causes. Not to repeat myself there, in our follow-up email to all the folks that have tuned in for this and past sessions. We'll also include a link to the volunteering page for City of Good, information on the CCC Fund and the Treefort Fund to support creatives in our community. I, for one, am really excited to see what's produced come, I think, September for the CCC Fund. Just to see the documentation and different things that are captured in our community. And, I guess, the other piece of this, I think that Dave talked about a bit, is the opportunity that we have here for Boise to continue to carve out its place in the world related to social impact businesses, to B corporations, to a way of doing business in Boise that is unique to Boise. And that I would say is unlike anywhere else. And I think you all are at the forefront of that. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to toss it to TM, who's going to give us a little bit of preview of next week, and then he will wrap it up.
Can I just also thank you and Kara and TM for always being great facilitators. Everything I've ever seen you be involved in, and TM is really bringing people together and highlighting what other people in this community are doing, and that takes a lot of energy, and appreciate you making that happen.
Thank you for those kind words. I think we all have really good role models in all of you, and how to do things in the community. Yeah, as far as next week goes, we have a session carved out for our audience. Innovation and Energy, Retrolux and Jewel Case will be in attendance. The episode is the Early Stage Leaders segment that you've seen previously with Simply Elope and Gather. And so I look forward to the discussion with those two businesses, the news that they have to share with us, and ways they've coped through the pandemic. And that said, just to wrap this up, I couldn't have said it any better way than Nick has already said it. And at this point, I just want to express my gratitude for your time and for everything you do in the community. You know, as Jason's mentioned it earlier, Trailhead is also a nonprofit. And so we view this as we're all in this together. And we look to you and your initiatives as role models on what to do for our own community. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
We'll see you next week.
All right.
Bye for now.
Bye.